his South American connections. But it was more than a marriage of convenience. There were some moments when one could have seen them as just a New York couple in love, having their quiet dinners with neighborhood friends in their neat flat. But family life got dicey when Greene, now dealing kilos of cocaine, dug too deep into his own stash and, caught off guard, was hijacked for a few ounces of product. He sensed trouble and moved his bride to a safe house. Even a paltry 3 ounces doesn't miss the fierce scrutiny of a Colombian businessman, and, in short order, a hitman was sent up from Miami with a warning to Greene. If you don't have the 3 ounces back, you're dead tomorrow. He wished his wife off on a plane to Miami and, wired and paranoid, made the mistake of trying to hide out in the not-so-safe safe house. He had barely arrived there when the joint was firebombed. Greene escaped and rang up his wife. "Look, you can't come home. I fucked up." Though practically strangers to each other since then, Greene never took steps to have the marriage dissolved. The only places left to hide were in way off-Broadway theater spaces where he literally fell into acting at 25. Greene met the legendary actress and coach Penny Allen, for whom he did a scene from the play K2, Allen Recalls. In the scene, he knew he was going to die, and it was almost that sacrificial element that's within Peter. He's the kind of actor that will walk the edge, in the best sense of the word, no matter what it costs. Allen championed Greene's talent, nudging him into the New York independent film world where an actor could be a rogue and revered for it. Greene was soon reunited with a childhood friend he hadn't seen much since he left home, Clayton Brooks. They now bonded over something else, dope. Brooks had some unusual ideas and unusual ways of expressing them that kept even the easily bored Greene captivated. As a junkie, Brooks was hardcore. As a writer, prolific. And as a poet performance artist, he was outrageous. Now Greene had more than just a partner in crime. He had a friend with whom he could talk about God, the devil, sexuality, the government, ad infinitum. With a couple of strong bags of China White in each of them, they could walk winter streets with jackets wide open, warm with the breath of confidences exchanged, and bloodstreams full of dope and Little Italy cappuccino. Greene went to Hollywood. Brooks stayed in New York and eventually crashed. He realized that as a failed writer, he had to die for his words to live, if only in a passionate suicide note to his friend. In Hollywood, Greene had sleepwalked through a career of playing bad guys brilliantly. He knew this. He had destroyed everything worthwhile in his life at an age when many men are raising children. He was busy poisoning the child inside of him. That Errol Flynn character he liked less and less every day, and becoming as cold and ruthless as any villain he portrayed in the movies. All Greene had left was Brooks's suicide and his own hallucinations. Friends received the occasional call in which he would narrate the movements of SWAT teams he thought was swarming outside from his apartment balcony. His voice on randomly dialed answering machines rang with the tragic irony that he had, for that moment, become a chemically induced facsimile of the schizo-paranoid he played in Clean Shaven. Past traumas had caught up with him, and there was no relief unless he followed Clayton Townsend. Indeed, he gave suicide his best shot that long March night at the Marmont, but Peter Greene woke up. Later at home, with a shot of dope strong enough to kill an elephant, he tried again. He took the shot, threw up on himself, and passed out for 3 days. A worried friend called the Los Angeles police, who awakened him by banging on the door. The windows on his home had been shut with the heat on full blast while he slumbered in his own waste, bathed in toxic sweat as blood, syringes, and crack pipes baked in the oven-like apartment. He rose and answered the door. He found 3 cops asking if they could come in. "Not unless you got a warrant." Before he could cry foul, the cops were in and had him handcuffed to a chair. They were laughing at him. He heard their mocking laughter and was mortified. It finally hit him, the epiphany that would humble him enough so he could ask for help. Shit, the cops who found him so hilarious didn't even have anything to arrest him on. He'd finished everything. After the cops split, he picked up the phone. Puffing a cigar, strolling along Venice Beach, marveling at the ocean, a sight that had escaped him as a smacked-out zombie, the newly sober Peter Greene would seem to have a lot to enjoy this afternoon. But Greene he's crying a lot today, racked with guilt for leaving Clayton Brooks alone in New York to die without him. If Clayton were with us, he wouldn't have jumped. He may have been around a little bit longer, you see. He didn't have anybody around him to go on walks, to shoot the shit with him. And I wasn't around anymore. All of a sudden, through the fellowship of those who, given their own war stories of addiction, empathized enough to care, Greene isn't out there raging alone anymore. He's in the gym, agonizing under iron he's not yet fit to pump, getting wacky on espresso and putting on a few good sculptured pounds. He's telling his own war stories. The events chronicled above were related mostly by Greene himself. He wanted help, and it came through. But it's still not easy. The emotions once reserved for screen time have come flooding to the surface as he baby steps through his first months clean. At times, the addict's rage is that rage instinct kicks in, and he lashes out with his 1,000-yard stare, or worse, his fists. Almost any recollection of his past now brings a throb of guilt. Faces you'd figure he has no business remembering keep popping up, like that of a little boy who watched the junkies get high at a shooting gallery Greene frequented in New York City back in the day. Quote, "I felt so close to that kid," says Greene, trying to make sense of it all. "But I'd be sitting there with a fucking needle in my arm talking to him, and he'd be so excited to talk and shit, and I saw him about 6 years later. He must have been 16. And before I even saw the tracks, I knew he was on the shit." He regrets letting his parents get old without him, hurting every woman he ever thought he loved, being so selfish, becoming so insane. He's grateful for his new sanity. "I used to thrive on that insanity. I would do whatever the fuck I wanted when I wanted to, and no one could tell me no. And now I realize that all the no's I've ever heard were for my own good, but I took them as a definite offense to me. Who are you to tell me I'm fucked up?" He shakes his head. "Meanwhile, I'm puking out of a fucking car and getting beaten up by Mexicans." While he sometimes has to remind himself not to romanticize the squalor of his past, one thing he knows to the bone is that for him, to get high is to die, and each day is a test. He was recently called back to the scene of the almost fatal meltdown. A day of reshoots was needed on the rich man's wife. He suited up, and at call time, his head was held high. The makeup artist, who had camouflaged his track marks, saw his newly healed arm and beamed with pride. Greene menaced his way through the new scenes like there had never been a break in continuity. At Shia Brasserie, a trendy Hollywood bistro, Greene leans over his giant steak and says, we're men now, dude. And it took me this long to realize what you have to do to be a man. And you know what? I have this strange little inkling that maybe being a man ain't as hard as I thought it was. Maybe life on life terms ain't so fucking bad. When the movie Tough Guy is reminded that it takes a real tough guy to surrender, he says, then you know what? I'm ready. My white flag is up, he announces for the entire restaurant to hear. And it's huge. He starts to laugh. It's infectious. And you can see it 20 miles away. Heads turn in the restaurant, but no one runs for cover. Career high, Premier Magazine, 1996. I'll be putting it on my website, www.hollywoodinterrupted.com. In the meantime, I hope you all have a good week. I'm Mark Ebner. You're in the gray zone. Please tip the monkey on the way out. Shoot me some shekels, will you? markebner59@gmail.com. Same for Venmo, or you can subscribe at patreon.com. That's www.patreon.com/Mark Ebner. I'll be yakking at you next week from here in the gray zone.